Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky.
And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, kick us off, man.
All right, this week on the podcast, we got a returning guest, Erik Weber. Erik, great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to see you too again.
Yeah. All right, so today we are going to dive right into day one on a Scrum team. What do you do with your team? You know, a lot of people focus on events. They focus on the roles. They focus on the artifacts. They focus on the commitments. But what do you focus on, Erik? Like, where do you start with the team?
Yeah, this is always an interesting question. And the reason it came up is in the past year or two, I've been launching teams without ever talking about relative estimation or velocity. We just go right into the Kanban flow metrics. I know y'all have talked a lot about that on this podcast. But I thought it'd be interesting to really think between the three of us, what are the important things to focus on? Because the mechanical things are the easy part, right? Like you have to schedule sprint planning. This is what you do in sprint planning. That's the easy part. But what are some of the harder things that we should focus on when we're launching a Scrum team? And I honestly, the first thing I think about is the product owner. Product owners are usually not too familiar with how Scrum works, right? They're usually not coming from a development background or a place where they have a lot of Agile or Scrum or Kanban or Lean exposure. And I think they deserve some help on day one to really figure out what their role is in this. Have you ever seen a situation where like the team is doing just fine, but the product owner is kind of the problem early on just because they don't have the experience?
Yeah, I think sometimes the product owner goes back to their traditional roles of like, oh, I just tell you what the requirements are and then you just do them. And that's how we get work done. And I see a lot of teams where they want to create a product backlog item and they want it to be a task. And so I think work breakdown structures is a really important thing to tackle right away, because the most important thing in Scrum, the thing that makes it different is delivery, and it's delivery of value. And so how do you get that? So first, I think it's like, what is valuable and what is a work item that we deliver that is valuable? What does it mean to get that to done? That's usually where I like to start, because like if we delivered something of value to done in the first sprint, well, we can work from that, right? Like that's hard for a lot of teams. And so if we can get there in the first sprint, I think that's success.
Yeah. So I think that's a great like day one conversation is like, hey, product owner, your job isn't so much to elicit well-formed requirements. We need you a little bit of in front of that train. We need you out there figuring out who are your users, what is your product, what problem does your product solve, and talking about that stuff. And then same goes for the dev team. Like, hey, dev team, we need you to relax a little bit on needing every single PBI broken down into 20 acceptance criteria. Like we need you to do some of that work so that your product owner can spend a little bit more time really figuring out what's valuable. Right. And I think there can be a really good, agreement or trade-off there where it's like, all right, we're doing Scrum now. This is new for everybody. And the product owner is going to go a little bit closer to the customer, and the dev team is going to come up a little bit more into backlog management territory. And they're going to do a little bit more work with making sure that PBIs have acceptance criteria and descriptions and pictures and whatever else they need, but they have to do some of that work. They can't just rely on the product owner to deliver all of that as if the product owner is the requirements engineer.
Yeah, I want to double tap though into Jeff what you were talking about with the increment, right? And I'm really excited with the team that I'm working with right now, because they're like the light bulb is starting to come on here, because they started having a sprint review and bringing stakeholders in, and the stakeholders' eyes will just glaze over when they start talking about things, and it's like, okay, well, why is that? Why are you completely losing your stakeholders when they're in the room, when they're at a sprint review? And like, as we're going through talking about it, the analogy that I love using is your backlog, and I stole this from Don, so kudos to him. But like, think about your backlog as the menu at your local restaurant. Okay, so when we're at a sprint review, your stakeholders are expecting you to bring the cheeseburger. They're expecting you to bring the 5 cheese ziti, whatever that menu item is. But you're busy talking about how you cut the cheese, okay? How you selected the beef, how you got the lettuce onto, like, it takes 2 to 3 sprints before you're delivering the burger to them, okay? They don't care about the lettuce, they don't care about the patty, they don't care about the ketchup per se. They care about that meal altogether. And so they're trying to get them to like reframe what is it that you're actually going to talk about and demo at your sprint review. To, in essence, they're too busy like building tasks without actually understanding the deliverable to the customer. And so where I keep kind of nagging them is like, how are you going to demo this at the sprint review? Like, and that kind of triggers the conversation to like, is this a component or is this a feature? Is this an item of value that we can talk about at the next review, or is it just work being done?
I like that a lot. Well, one thing that you can actually do in sprint planning is script out your sprint review, right? Like imagine the future state when this sprint is done. What are you actually going to demo?
Mm-hmm.
And like what's the flow? What are the features? What are the points that you have to make about users using this feature? And just like rough script out your sprint review, and then that kind of informs all of the things that you're going to have to do in the sprint, right? Like we don't have to sit there and think of the 35 tasks that it's going to take to complete this feature. If we know that at the sprint review we're going to walk through these 5 highlights of this feature, right? And then the team can figure out what tasks are needed from there. But you kind of have the goal in mind, the end in mind, right from the get-go.
Yeah, I think the teams have it a little backwards. If we want to build on what Jeff was saying with the menu, it's like if you go to a restaurant, a really nice restaurant, right? Waiter's going to come up to you and say, "This is our special today. We have this aged ribeye. It's been aged for 38 days. We've done this butter aging. It melts the enzyme side and makes it super, super tender. Is that something you'd be interested in today?" It's like, before I go ahead and build this for you or make this for you, does this sound like something you would want? And the stakeholder is like, "That sounds amazing. I want that." But it's just very similar to a team saying, "Well, we could build this thing out. It would scale out to 1 million users. It'd be able to do blah, 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 blah. We take this process." And I'm like, as a stakeholder, I'm like, "That sounds great because I know about this other thing that, whatever. And I want that." And so they're picking it beforehand, where now we're saying, "Well, we've built it so it can scale. We've done this thing and, all these things." And we're telling about it afterwards. And what if I didn't want that as a stakeholder? Like we don't have that. We've run out of options. We've already committed to so many things. A lot of times in that sprint review, we're talking about how we're building it instead of what's been done. I'd rather us talk about what we're going to do and like make sure we're on the same page and we're aligned so we can plan for that in that next sprint.
Well, similar to this, another kind of day one, sprint one conversation that I've been having with teams is at the sprint review, I've really been shying away from sharing details of PBIs. Like even shying away from saying like, we got these 7 PBIs done and we're about to demo them. No, I don't want to hear any of that. Like I really just want to start with the product first. And like, if it's important for some other reason to have a ledger of completed PBIs, we can put that on a slide or something like that. Yep. But for whatever reason, and I'll go out on a limb here and say that we've all seen this at various organizations. For whatever reason, 90% of sprint reviews start out with a slide of here's the things that are done, here's the things that didn't get done.
Yep.
Now just imagine like I'm sitting in a sprint review. I'm a high-level stakeholder. My entire bonus is dependent upon the performance of this product. And the first thing you're telling me is what didn't get done. Right? And it's a misalignment, and you're stepping off with the wrong foot. Right at the beginning of your sprint review, you're putting people in a defensive position because the first thing that they want to talk about now is what didn't get done, and like go into all of the training that we've had for the past 40 years about how to manage projects and think about like, okay, how are we going to make up this time? How do we go faster? How do we get more done? And that's what you're thinking about during the event where you're supposed to be inspecting the thing that the team built and figuring out whether or not it's the right thing right? All of the risks that we know to be the biggest risks are not execution risks, and whether or not you got 8 or 9 PPIs done this sprint, we know that those aren't the things that massively derail projects and cause catastrophic failures. It's always assumptions that we make about the product, assumptions that we make about the users that turn out not to be true. So in the sprint review, when we start with accounting and ledgers and what got done and what didn't get done, we're putting people in a defensive mode to talk about the project execution instead of the actual real existential risks that go along with product development.
Yeah, Jeff, I just want to go in this. I don't want to recap because this is what came into my head, and you tell me if this makes sense to you, Erik. So are we saying when we get to a sprint review, don't talk about the inputs into the sprint review for that increment. Talk about the outputs. Talk about the problem that you solved for me as a stakeholder. If you start with the problem you solved, it's probably like, well, we can now do this thing with the product. And here's the options we think it opens up for us. And here's where we think we're going to go in the future. I think that's a much better place to go than a ledger of inputs. And if you do that, you really probably have a lack of trust inside of that team and the stakeholders, like that we have to prove that we worked hard this sprint. It's like, and that's not really what we're after. Where it's not. This isn't a. We want to make sure you put your time in and you put all these hours in, or you put all this, got all the things done and all the, checks check marked. And what were you going to say, Jeff?
Two things. I got a question for you, but it reminds me a lot of back in the glory days of DC, and Hayes actually had us do this, where it was put the actual story in the slide deck of what you're going to step through, like show the value of what you're now going to be able to accomplish with this new release of the product or this new increment of the product. But the question I had is I want a quick walk through, like, what does my sprint review deck look like? And I want to get your guys' feedback on it. Because I'm looking to try to improve it a little bit. So one, my decks are made to stand alone because I do the recording. I send the deck out afterwards for all stakeholders in case they can't make it. But so it's basically just like outline of the mission or mission, because every deck starts with that. Outline of the team mission, outline of the definition of done, or outline of the team, outline of the definition of done, outline of the items that were accomplished, outline of what's coming up next, outline of when that is forecasted to be done, and then the one additional item for transparency that we're going to start putting in there is planned versus unplanned work. So how much of our sprint was dedicated to things that we had anticipated working on versus things that came in sideways during the sprint, like, because we have all of our engineers are part of an on-call cycle, so we want to keep track of that. So what additions or changes would you make to that deck?
So, go ahead, Erik. I'll let you answer first.
I don't think I would make many additions or changes, although the deck, I want to know where you actually inspect the increment.
Yeah. So I just quick fly through that. I try through that deck in about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we turn off the deck and I hand it over to the developers, and away they go. Like, they show the increment at that point.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. That's what I assumed. I think the only thing is, like, the list of work that you got done isn't important. Or maybe you could do the thing that you were just recollecting from the glory days of the Dev Center. By the way, I still think it's awesome that, like, we all know each other from a company that we worked at 10 years ago now. And there's still things about the way that company worked that were like the pinnacle of awesomeness. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but like every other company that I've been to, I pick up a couple other pinnacles of awesomeness here and there. But man, we've had some good experience actually doing good Scrum.
That's, I think about that more times than not.
Yeah, it just gave us all such a solid base, right? Like, this is how it should be. Like, delivering every sprint, working together, everybody improving, everybody swarming to a problem, everyone working towards a common goal. Like, there were so many good things that we did. Yeah.
But that's something you could do, is like, maybe instead of putting the list of things that got done, use that slide to say to put in the user story or the feature name or something like that. I think stakeholders just glaze over when it's like, all right, here's the list of work that got done. Jira ticket 53207, Jira ticket 60601. Like, with the name of it or what, like, it just doesn't do anything for stakeholders. And then especially if the bottom half of that slide is, here's the things that we planned for, but we didn't accomplish. Then we're back into this thing where
I don't bother talking about that shit. I am right there with you. Like, if it did not get done, I don't even fucking talk about it. Like, just show what got done. That's it.
Yeah.
I've started really rallying against this idea that at sprint planning, we could perfectly plan the next 10 business days of work. Right. And when I say it that way, everybody's like, well, yeah, of course, that seems silly. Right. Like, I need you to sit down and write out a plan for exactly what you're going to work on for the next 10 business days before our next sprint review, day by day, up until 5 minutes before the sprint review. And it's all got to meet the definition of done. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous, right? We would never expect anybody to do that. If I said that to a group of developers and I asked them to plan out the next 10 business hours, they couldn't do it, right? And it's not because they're not good enough or they don't have the right tools or training. It's just that's not the way our work works. If our old friend Rob Pieper were here, he'd say we're not baking cookies, right? We're not doing something where it's like it takes 23 minutes in the oven every time, no matter what, and we can whip out a dozen cookies every half hour. We can't do that. So the thought of sitting in sprint planning and saying we're going to do these 9 PBIs this sprint is ridiculous. That next sprint review is just an arbitrary deadline. We've set it up on an arbitrary cadence in order to make mostly scheduling meetings in Outlook easier, but for many other important cadence-related reasons, it's totally arbitrary. So of course you will have work that's not done at the end of the sprint. Of course you will. Right? And sometimes during the middle of the sprint, you'll finish everything and you'll pull in more work. And sometimes you won't get anything done in a sprint because things absolutely blow up. Mm-hmm. Right? But we're not baking cookies here. It's not perfectly predictable. There's no success or failure in completing your sprint backlog. It's just a kind of a rolling artifact. And a day one conversation here with the team about not talking about undone work in a negative way, and instead focusing on how the team can improve how they're managing their work in the retrospective is a way better use of everybody's time, including the stakeholders' time. And we don't have to talk about that stuff in the sprint review.
Yep. One thing I would suggest, Jeff, to your deck is I would say when you're listing the things you're doing, maybe make a connection for your stakeholders. Like, what is the goal you're working toward with these things? Okay, these 5 PBIs were related to this goal. These 4 were related to this goal. And at least people can see the connection of why you did whatever you did and what problem you're trying to solve. And then they can give you feedback. Well, I don't know that that's going to solve the problem. Have you ever thought of this? Or maybe this new thing came in, but it was really to solve the same problem. It was just like, once we got into it, we found a better way. And so we did something different than what we thought we were going to do. I think we want to give the teams flexibility into that because they know their constraints. They look at the code and they're like, oh, this would be really easy. Why don't we just move this button around here or change this color here or do this thing here? Like, give the teams the autonomy to solve the problems, and not worry about like, well, that's not what we said we're going to do. And what are we going to show in the sprint review? It's more about the focus on the problem. So that'd be my first thing maybe I'd try to do. And then the second one, the last slide you had where it's like, your unplanned versus planned work that you're trying to see the metric. My next question is, what are you going to do with that? Like, what action are you taking from that metric? If you have a plan, then go for it. But maybe there's a better metric if you're not going to take an action on that.
Yeah. So part of that is just transparency. Like when we go into quarterly planning, like we organizationally, we like breaking things down between discretionary, non-discretionary, and KTLO. And so like unplanned work basically falls into the KTLO bucket. And so holistically, it's just nice to know, okay, well, how much of your time is going to unplanned work that is coming in over the next quarter? Like, how would we anticipate that? And then like, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but yeah, we still like estimate shit out in person weeks. Like as stupid as that is, like, okay, fine. At least it's something to wrap our heads around. The stupid comment is like, people will go through and add up the person weeks and be like, well, that doesn't equal out to how many people you've got on your team. And this is just kind of a leave me the fuck alone. Yeah, that's KTLO. And then all these other initiatives are kind of broken down on the quarterly plan. But to your other comment, I didn't explain it really well, but that is actually what I do, like linking it down, like, okay, here's the goal that we're going after, and here's all the work that aligns up to it. And then part of the other thing with that is it's helpful then to order that. So I try and order things with the teams like, hey, this is probably the stuff that stakeholders are going to be most interested in. So let's front load this in the conversation. And that way they can drop off if they need to. So
the other one I would throw in there is like, if there's you don't have to have, this is like a slide that you would add if you need it. Don't put it in every time, but it's like, what's the problem you need help solving? One thing I've learned, I don't know why it took me so long to learn this, but like when you go into a sprint review and you meet with executives, and Erik's an executive, so he knows this. If you tell them a problem, they're going to try to solve it if you don't have a plan. So make sure, like when you're saying, I've got this problem, like you want their help in solving that problem, because then they're going to get involved. So if you need help with something, put it in there. But if you don't, maybe you're like, we got it. Just, we don't need to talk about that in the sprint review.
I know it doesn't seem like this, especially in large organizations, but the more a dev team can specifically ask for help from the people in the sprint review, from stakeholders, the more they're going to get what they want. Right? But a lot of teams don't feel like they can make requests upwards because of culture or whatever. But like in a sprint review, having a slide where it's like, hey, these are the 3 big things that we have to figure out as a team, and it's not clear to us right now. I don't know how long it's going to take to figure these things out. I don't know who needs to be involved. We need help.
Yep.
You have everybody in that room that's going to figure that out, or at least find the right people and connect you to the right people. You might even be overwhelmed with how many people they want you to talk to about these big nasty issues that you're trying to solve. But ask for what you need. Right? There's nothing better that an executive wants. I know it doesn't. And if you're listening to this and you work for a kind of a big, slow, bureaucratic organization, I know it doesn't feel like that. But the managers, the stakeholders in your organization are dealing with the same stuff you are, and asking them for help in a very specific way. Like, we need to figure out the security policy around this. We need to figure out our launch strategy with marketing or whatever. Like, they will go find that stuff out. Like, that seems like a fun problem, a fun part of their job as a middle manager at a large company, right? Like, you're going to get the help that you want, but most teams don't ask for it.
Mm-hmm. Until it's too late, and then now we're in a time crunch, and then it's like, why didn't you tell us about this sooner, right? And then it's a blame game. So having that transparency is a great thing.
Can I switch topics a little bit?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. The other day one conversation that I've been having is about the definition of done. And this one, like, you're gonna hear a collective eye roll on this podcast when I say this. I have still, in 2021, gone into organizations who have been doing Scrum for 10 years. I gave a talk in August to one of them, and the title, I just had an hour, and I was going to spend 10 minutes on the 3 most important things in Scrum. And one of them was the definition of done. I started talking about it for 45 seconds. A hand went up in the audience. I said, hey, yeah, good question. She's like, what's a definition of done? Right? This company had been doing Scrum, like, not unsuccessfully. They're a fairly successful company. They've been doing it for 10 years, and they'd never heard the concept of definition of done. Now, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how they learned Scrum, or how they got trained in Scrum. That would never happen if it was us.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it's worth bringing up and kind of like evangelizing the importance of definition of done from day one, from sprint one. We have to distinguish between what done means here and what all of the other things in the past that we did that were half done, done, but all of that stuff is in the past. And now we have a very strict definition of done that we're never going to sway from. Companies still struggle with this concept. And I don't understand how they're being taught like this, but it's real. It's out there. People are doing Scrum without the definition. Have you seen this?
All the time. Yeah. Or they have one, but it's way away in some SharePoint site that no one has ever looked at and they can't find, and they don't use it anymore. It's like, yeah, it's done-ish. I think it meets all the stuff. It's very lackadaisical in some companies if they do have it. I don't know, Jeff, what's your thoughts? What do you see?
I was going to say, I'll give you another scenario. We have 2 definitions of done. which is also not uncommon. And I know, Eric, you're ready to chime in here, but hold on, let me explain the situation, because as soon as I
better than one, right? I mean,
well, yeah, exactly. The issue is they do not have, they being the team that I work with, and this was a hill that I just didn't feel like dying on at the time. But the reason they have two is because they do not have the ability to actually push the production. So everything is handled by another team that does the full rollouts of backend. So there's basically, the back end system, the front end for our clients, and we don't have control over to roll it out. So the first definition of done is something is done if I'll give them like points for saying that they're explicit with it. They say if we are if we are developing a feature for an environment that we don't have control over, something is considered done when it is put into this state. And then a follow-up item is created to actually validate once it has been able to be rolled out into production. Okay.
I love that so far.
Yeah.
Like
That's
in that context where you don't have control over that environment, like it sounds like
What do
you're
you
doing
do?
the right thing.
And then the secondary one is for environments where we do have full control over things. So like our support site, we've got full control over that. We can deploy to it whenever we want. Basically, done is for the customer when it's an environment that a customer can interact with. Now, I'm there with you, Eric. Like I kind of fall on both sides of this, but I still lean towards we should get rid of the first one. Like done to be consistent, because otherwise, every time we're in a sprint review, we have both of these things in there. We have items that fall into both of these definitions of done, and it's very confusing to a stakeholder. Well, which done is this, right? And that's why I say like we should just get rid of the first one. It is too confusing. And I realize that it's disappointing to a Scrum team to say, "Oh, it's ready to go. We just don't have control." Well, your customer doesn't fucking care about your internal
Right.
processes that are holding you back. Like to them, it's only done when it's in the environment that they can start engaging with it.
Yeah. This is tough, especially if we think about the Sprint 1 conversation. Your Sprint 1 DoD is not going to be pushed to production and live for customers. So
Well, it could be, but it's
unlikely, right? Jeff, we work together at a company. I don't know. Do you mention names of companies on here? We won't mention the name of this company. It's not.
I don't care. You can mention names.
We worked at a company together, and our first sprint, our definition of done was literally works on Mike's laptop. Right. And that was appropriate because Mike's laptop was in a box on a desk at the point where we were creating a definition of done and launching our first sprint. So we didn't even know if his laptop was going to work. So it was already a huge stretch. But the point here is that in Sprint 1, your definition of done can be very small. What I want you to do as a team, though, is create your definition of done for right now and your definition of done for the future. And I want them in the same place and on the same document or whatever. Done right now, and things that we know that we need to build into the DoD, but we do not have the technical or economic capability to right now. And then every single retro, we're trying to move things above the line, right? Yep. And then eventually, maybe it's to your point, like the way that your team's doing it now, you don't have the ability to ship to some of these environments. So for you, your current definition of done is, hey, it's in this state and a work item has been created in order to finish the deployment to an environment that we don't control. Well, then down in the future definition of done, maybe you put, we have control over shipping to that environment, right? And then your DoD becomes, it's shipped.
But what a lot of teams do, Jeff, that you said that you're doing is they don't even put a PBI out there, something out there to give transparency into this is another step that has to happen. And now as a product owner, I'm like, well, I'm planning that we can maybe do this and then this and this. And I'm thinking about a release plan. And there's a lot of extra work that's not transparent. And then we don't get it done. And now we're wondering why, right? And then there's this blame game. So I think it's important to make that transparent and keep working, like Eric said, to trying to build out your definition of done to get it to where you want it to be,
The DoD is such a big deal. I don't understand why there's not more focus on it everywhere, even in companies that use it. blows my mind that some companies don't use it. I don't understand how they get anything done. Well, and technically speaking, I guess they don't get anything done if they don't know what done means.
Well,
Um,
here's I think the problem. We've talked about this a couple times, is that there's such a focus in organizations on efficiency. I want to keep hands on
Yeah.
keyboards and keeping people busy, and not focus on getting to done and getting to deliver it out to a customer and solving some customer problem. If our whole sprint was like, okay, your sprint costs $40,000 over the next 2 weeks, what are you going to give? What value are you delivering to a customer for $40,000? If that was the origin of our conversation at the sprint review, probably be very, very different on like, well, I wrote this code, I did this thing. It's like, what problem did you solve? And if we don't solve something as a team, then we have a hard conversation at the sprint review,
One of the interesting things I think about a lot, and I'll relate this to the definition of done in a second. One of the interesting things I think about a lot are the natural tensions between different departments in an organization: sales, marketing, product development, engineering, security, legal. There's always going to be some natural tensions because each department is experts on their own things. They want to get their viewpoints across. That everybody has an opinion on what the company's product should be. All of these natural tensions occur. And one way to and for whatever reason, it always seems like product development is the end of the waterfall, right? Like it's like shit rolls downhill.
Or if it's a wheel, they're the center, and everyone else is just a spoke outside the side, right? So it's like everything merges into the middle, or they're like
all of the pressure is on the team, right? It's always, how do we write code faster? How do we do this faster? So for whatever reason, all of the pressure is on product development. One way to balance that out is by really strongly focusing on building out the most robust definition of done that you can. And Jeff, Molesky, you and I have seen this at the company we work for. When you have a really strong definition of done and you're going to a sprint review saying, these things are done, they're deployed to QA or UAT or production or whatever your end environment is. They're deployed, they're ready to use. The questions that get asked in that sprint review are no longer about, cool, how can we do this faster? The questions that get asked then are, hey, sales, did you know about this? Hey, marketing, what's your launch plan for this? Right? What are we doing to evangelize these features to the public? Like, I see somebody sent out a tweet, but that's not really a marketing strategy. Like, what are we doing to let our users know about these new features that are available, right? So the stronger definition of done you have, the less execution and efficiency type pressures your team gets, because it's more important that some things are done all of the way than having a lot of things kind of half-baked and showing a lot of progress and having this feeling that everybody's very busy, but still having discussions about how do we go faster. Mm-hmm. If we get things done to a really high degree, like production, hopefully, or close to it, the discussion is going to be about all of the rest of the company and the other things that have to happen to make this a successful enterprise versus, hey, engineers, type code faster so we get more done. Right. And everybody in product development just kind of rolls their eyes. And all of the other stakeholders are like, yeah, if we got more features, we would get more value. But if you have a strong definition done, features are in production, now it's, hey, how are we going to sell those? How are we going to market those? What do we have to do from a legal perspective? Right? It's all of the other departments in the organization, and that tension kind of balances itself out.
Yeah, there's another one actually I want to bring up, because I thought you were going to go slightly different with that when you were talking about other areas of the organization. I thought you were going to go with incentive structures, but kind of tying the two together, it has been wake up call isn't the right word, but like typically when I've been a product owner or product manager in the past, that the ownership of a product exists end to end. And what I mean by that is one of the issues that we've been running into at our organization is the product managers really have only focused on the ownership of the experience in app. And they've forgotten about like an experience extends outside of your app as well. And so I've been over in the customer service area, and that is, to me, and I would argue, is certainly part of your customer experience, right? Like whenever there's an issue and they reach out to your org, like that is part of the experience. It's just extending outside of your app. And so one of the items that we've been really kind of hammering home over the past quarter to second half of the year has been our referral program. So for Acorns, like, we're finding that our referral customers are, like, we've got lots of data on this, but it's heads and shoulders above any other type of marketing blast that brings consumers or customers onto the platform. It's the referrals that drive this stuff. And so we've really been leveraging that. So we've got a market or a growth team that has been building out features and functionality to really get referrals onto the platform and make it easier for you to refer other customers. But what they have lost sight of was, what is the downstream effects of that? And that is a tremendous burden on the customer support team. And so we've been able to calculate, like, when we do this type of referral, this results in X amount of additional tickets coming in, which then impacts the actual CAC, the customer acquisition cost for that customer, and all of these other items that go into it. But essentially, what I'm just trying to throw out there for people to consider is, one, that experience extends outside of your app. It is the entire experience of your customer with your organization, not just, when they're in the app on their phone. But secondary is to think about, like, what are the external impacts of the features that you're putting out there. And this customer support one is a very easy one to consider. So yes, we might be turning the dial up on getting lots of referrals into the app, which is great. But what are the downstream effects of that? For instance, when they're calling in the customer support, when they're running into issues, why they haven't gotten their referral bonus, what's the status of all the friends that they're referring to the platform, et cetera. Like, all those questions, make sure they can answer those in app so that they don't need to reach out to your customer support team. And if they do, that should be calculated into the cost of the features that you're rolling out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you should have a holistic view to the ROI of the features that you're generating and the operational cost that's associated with them.
Yeah. And I think that can be a common pattern if it's recognized as a pattern, which is what you're doing basically is, okay, we're going to have this feature in the app that allows you to refer. And for now, we are going to concierge everything that happens after that, right? Mm-hmm. We are going to pay money for people to answer support tickets and give a high level of customer service to all of the questions that are going to come out of this referral program. Most companies just stop there. And it sounds like you're trying to do the right thing, close that loop where it's like, hey, look, now we're paying all this money to provide a high level concierge service to our customers and our new referrals. Why don't we take their top 5 questions and allow them to answer that for themselves in the app? And here's the data for the top 5 things that they ask, right? Where's my referral bonus? When does it get paid out? Whatever it is. So closing that loop on that and putting it right back in the product, I think, is awesome. And that's something else that you could talk about on your definition of done, right? Like, the definition of done is not just the software engineering tasks or the product development tasks. It's also, how are we going to support this? Where does it live? What documentation has to be created, like FAQs or something like that? Are we concierging all of the questions to this, or is this spurring new feature ideas that need to make their way to the backlog? All that stuff is awesome.
Yeah, and I want to be clear with this, though. Like, that whole concierge thing, that's fine if that is your decision, but understand what that really means. Like, do we have the staff to concierge this projected growth of calling in, right? Like, because I mean, that's where we dropped the ball. We didn't understand that. And now all of a sudden we've got customers that are waiting on hold for 20, 30, 40 minutes to talk with somebody because we didn't properly project out the volume of what was coming in. And so to what you were just saying there, Eric, and that's really my point, is really just understanding more holistically and thinking through, like, put that shit on your definition of done. Like, we have projected out the anticipated operational cost of rolling out this new feature. And, like, whatever that happens to be, maybe it's marketing and they have to increase the marketing spend because they've got to put some blast campaign out there, or it's legal and compliance needs to do some more legwork for making sure that X is compliant with whatever standards that are out there, right? Like, whatever X is, just make sure we're thinking about and solving for it.
This is another one of those things that falls into the bucket of product owners need help on day one, because most product owners coming into the role are going to think that their jobs are to write all of the features that the team needs to develop, instead of talking about the things that you just talked about, right? You own the experience end to end, including things that happen upstream and downstream from whatever your domain is in the organization. And you need time to at least talk about that and talk with other stakeholders about it and formulate a plan. Otherwise, what happens is we create this feature that creates all of these downstream effects, most of them unintended and unpredicted. And now maybe we have some negative downstream effects that nobody's thinking about or talking about. And we end up with, 2,500 people in a call center overseas with all of your customers waiting on a phone for 30 minutes just to figure out when the referral bonus pays out, which is something that could be an FAQ. Or it could be right on the page when you refer people. Like, there's all sorts of other product decisions you could make instead of having a massive call center.
Yeah, I think of it
It's
as
not a bad way. The important thing here is, like, it's not a bad way to start. Let's do that. Let's get the referrals. Let's get all of these new customers in there, knowing that we're going to have to pay to support them.
Right.
because it's what assumption are you trying to prove out? So maybe the first thing, like you're talking about with the referral program, you're saying, is it usable? Will people use this? Is it desirable in a market? Once you've proven that, because you're going to take your best guess and you're going to be wrong. We can't predict the future. So sometimes you'll be wrong. But once you prove you're wrong and you have overcapacity and you've pushed this thing downstream, you have a new problem to solve. Stop trying to make that more desirable and more usable. You've already solved that problem. Now it's like, how do we make this operational? So now we need to think, how do we make this feasible? The ROI isn't there. People are sitting on a call center for 50 minutes. We spent the money to get them there. And now we're losing them before we even get to talk to them. So what do we need to do? What's the question they're asking? Like, to your point, Eric, like that's your next problem to solve. And I don't know that a lot of product owners have that whole domain or that whole, and they don't think about it in that whole big way. They don't own that whole thing. And so they only do the part they know about.
They usually don't, but even if they don't own that whole thing, we as Agile coaches, Scrum masters, product people, like if you're helping a team launch a new project like this is something that you and your PO need to chat about right at the beginning. Otherwise, you'll get stuck in your little fiefdom or whatever, and you'll never be thinking upstream or downstream. So like let's help the POs get out there and think about what happens after done, what happens before things hit the backlog. What are all of those processes, and how does the business make decisions on those? POs need to be involved in that kind of stuff. And if somebody like us or somebody that hasn't done Scrum for a while isn't there, they're going to get stuck in their backlog manager role. It's just natural, right? That's what the training's about. That's what the internet says you do. You write PBIs, you write user stories. You're going to get stuck there. It's just natural.
Hey, Eric, interesting phrasing that you used there, that a PO needs to be involved in that stuff. And I want to double tap on that because in my world, in Jeff's world, the PO drives that stuff. Like the PO is actually accountable for doing all of that stuff because that's part of owning a product. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, like, was there a specific reason why you said involved versus drive or accountable?
I soften that language a lot for larger organizations. Like I don't actually think that a product owner at an international bank is going to be singularly accountable for the end-to-end experience of the product. Never seen it. Sure. Would it be cool? Yes. Do I think it happens sometimes as smaller companies start to scale? Sure. There's probably one product owner accountable for most of the things at any single use app. Whether it's something like Facebook that's now gigantic with lots of product owners. I mean, for a while, Zuckerberg was just the PO accountable for everything. Okay. So sometimes it happens, but like in any big organization, some international bank or whatever, like product owner is not going to be singularly accountable. It's some VP that's singularly accountable. Mm-hmm. So as we're starting Scrum teams and we're having conversations in the first couple sprints, I don't really want to fight that battle right away. I do want to eventually expand the accountability of the product owner role, but right away, the only thing I actually need the PO doing is to be involved. I need them to be in the room when these conversations are happening about upstream decisions that will affect the product backlog, and then after deployment decisions that affect the customer experience. They need to be involved in both of those things. And if we don't from day one say that you need to go to these meetings, you need to be involved, then they're going to sit and write user stories for 8 hours a day. It's the natural trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not their fault. Like, please don't hear me being negative on POs. It's not their fault. This is what the internet tells them to do.
Yep. I think when I have to explain it to product owners a lot of times, like, especially in bigger organizations, I'm like, I like to use analogies. So I like football a lot. So I use a football analogy. It's like offense, defense, special teams. Like, you might have to say, I'm not going to be the head coach. Like, if I'm coaching third grade football, I'm just one coach, head coach. He's going to say, this is the plan. This is what we're doing. I'm running the offense, I'm running the defense, special teams, the whole thing, right? But when you get higher level, you split into some more specialized roles. You might only have a domain in a certain area. Well, there's strategies you would use in certain cases because for an offense or a defense. But if you're not working together, then the other team can take advantage of that. So the same thing with a product, right? Like if we're winning and as an offense, I just keep throwing the ball every single time, I extend the game and allow the other team multiple opportunities to score, they have a better chance of coming back. I can run the ball. Same thing here. Like, why do I need to keep trying to score and gain more customers when a bunch of people are leaving the door because we can't even get them through the call center, like back to our previous example. So to your point, like, we have to be on the same page and have alignment on whatever we call our product definitions, but generally broader is better, I would say, than what a lot of people are doing today. And then, like, work together. Like, that alignment is really, really important.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in a lot of organizations. So with your product, when you were working with larger organizations, Erik, like, how do the product owners stay aligned across, that broader product experience?
Yeah, probably one of the best experiences I had in that kind of large organization setting was I worked on a product that had about a dozen teams, and all of the product owners had a weekly session, not a meeting, but like a 2 or 3 hour session with a larger group of stakeholders, where we kept a running list of things that we needed to talk about across the product. And since all the POs were there and other product management, product marketing, sales, and stakeholders folks were there, we could get everybody aligned and on the same page fairly quickly. We could tackle 2 or 3 big issues a week and figure out, where does the work go? Who needs to do what? Is it the right time? So all of the product decisions kind of surrounding the product, but not specifically product development, we met and hashed it out once a week, right?
Yep.
And I think that kind of like working session can be really valuable, especially at big organizations where maybe your purview as a PO looks more like a backlog manager. So then, some agile coaches will come in and be like, no, you have to own the whole product. And then there's just a brick wall and you stop and you get frustrated. But instead, if we were to say, like, hey, I need you to be exposed to sales, marketing, support, customer experience, legal. I need you to be exposed to all of this. And if we have a big product with a lot of product owners, like, hey, stakeholders, we're going to ask you to come to a 2-hour sprint review on even weeks and a 2-hour working session with product owners on odd weeks. Can you commit that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's a pretty low level of commitment that we're asking for from stakeholders, and it's very doable to kind of get product owners exposed to the larger organization pretty quickly.
And so going back to like where we were working, almost a decade ago together, we had this term for this. We called it external refinement. There wasn't the term in the Scrum guide for that, but it was meant to say, we're going to do something with these companies that haven't worked in a Scrum environment before, where we're going to meet and sync and align on all the experience here, where we're going weekly, and we're going to figure out where we're going next and do this just in time planning type thing.
We should invent and coin and trademark a term that there should be product backlog refinement, which we talk about ad nauseum, and we all know what that means. There should also just be product refinement.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens. It's not part of Scrum because Scrum, originally kind of developed to focus on how to do this. But in product, there's a whole lot of development that has to happen But it's usually between the product owner and other stakeholders, not typically between the product owner and the rest of the Scrum team. So we don't talk about it in Scrum. It's not in the Scrum guide. But there's 1,000. I'll go out on a limb here and say that there's an order of magnitude more decisions and important decisions to be made outside of the Scrum team than there are day to day on the Scrum team. And now, like, little flags might go off where it's like, why are you removing the Scrum team from all of these product decisions? I'm not removing them. I'm just saying that I think that one of the powers of having a singular product owner is that they are the person that can be involved in all of these things. Whereas I don't really need 8 product development professionals in a legal meeting about the copy we have to put in our trademark clause. Like, I don't need everybody there, right? And that's a low level example, but a higher level kind of product refinement example would be more like, I don't need the entire Scrum team there when I'm meeting with our branding agency to figure out if we should use chartreuse or green.
But I would say,
right?
if as a product owner, though, if you don't have strong UX skills, maybe I want to bring my UX specialist that's on my team as a development team member with me. I want to bring a delegate. If we're going in and we're talking about like, hey, we think we have this problem of scalability, I might want to bring somebody very technical in with me because I don't have that skill as a product owner. So I think, what skills you don't have, bring delegates from your team to help balance that out, but you still are the one ultimately owning that as a product owner, right?
The point being that there's just all of this work outside of Scrum, outside of the daily building of the product that product owners have to do. If we don't nudge them in that direction from day one, they're going to get stuck in the backlog management trap.
Yep.
And that's part of the power of the product owner position. We don't need the whole team in every one of the sales enablement meetings, but we need somebody from the team, and it's typically going to be the product owner. They at least need to know, be familiar with what sales needs out of the product, what legal needs out of the product, etc. So we got to start doing this and talking more about it from day one.
And then there's a loop that happens there. So you do this external refinement is what I like to call it, because it's a term we've coined and maybe just means something to us, but it's what we talked about. But then you need to bring that back to the team, because I might have, as a product owner, 8 hours of meetings with different people, and there might be 10 minutes of things I need to actually share with my team, but then it affects a lot of the work we're going to do over the next few sprints. Maybe we're going to reorder things. Maybe we need to add something here. Maybe we need to just focus on a different problem to solve in a certain area. So I think there's things that you can do this, like, we're going to all go off in different directions, but then we have to come back together at some point to get alignment and syncing. If we keep walking in different directions, it's a lot harder to come back together. So Jeff,
all right,
what do you think? Are you still doing those meetings as a product owner?
I was just being quiet over here and thinking about what you guys were saying. I like the table analogy. Like, you always have a seat at the table. Whether or not you take it is up to you. And so, to both of your guys' point, like, in all of those meetings, I will always invite a member of one of the developers there. And then thinking about both Teresa and Marty were talking about this, and I know this is what they call it, but I always think about it as this trinity, right? You've got an engineering lead of some sort, a UX lead of some sort, and your product lead of some sort. And so those are typically the people that I try to bring into most of those conversations, if not all of them. But again, it's optional. Like, if the UX person doesn't need to be there for a legal and compliance meeting, that's fine. Like, I'll collect that information. But then the other thing that I was also thinking about from our conversation with Marty is just like, I thought about it as, and I still think about it as, removing dependencies, but he really articulated it as like growing the knowledge of those other domains or areas of your organization. So like the role of the product manager isn't necessarily to take on and be a marketer, but it's to understand the marketing component of that so that you can think about and build that into your product up front. And so that's really when I'm meeting with these different areas, and I keep thinking about legal and compliance because they're my biggest pain in the ass. Like, I try and think about it from their perspective, like, what is the thing that they're trying to accomplish? And that's what I'm trying to build muscle memory into for all the things moving forward. And really being, the better that I can understand that, the better I can be an advocate for the team to talk about that stuff when we're into refinement. But that gets into the whole game of like, the mental capacity of a product owner. Like, how much can they really hold on to? And is it really better to try to centralize that knowledge in a product owner versus bringing it to a team, and then the whole trade-off of silos and going back and forth? And does your product owner really have to be the middleman or middlewoman between these different areas of the organization? And there's a lot to unpack there. But overall, I agree with everything we've been saying. It's like, bring the right people to the conversation, and always and don't think it has to be a one-person show, so to speak.
You triggered something for me. This isn't a day one conversation, so maybe this is a good way to end here, and we'll do a future episode for day two conversations. But a day two conversation with an organization, with a team, is that we probably need more product people on the dev team.
What do you mean?
Well, I really love all of the problems that are solved by having one product owner. And I really do not like the fact that a lot of product work still has to be done outside of the Scrum team. And I see no reason why we don't have product strategists, product marketing specialists, product support specialists. Go around to all of the departments. I see no reason why those people are not on the development team, right? Especially when there's enough work for them to do on a big product. Like for you, it seems like what would you say your biggest problems were? Compliance and legal. Like, can we get a paralegal on our team that liaises with legal once in a while and kind of knows the stuff? I don't know if this would work or not, but like, if you're having to interact with these other departments all the time, let's shortcut that and get one of those representatives on the team. So I
close that feedback loop and do it more frequently. That way we have less rework, and we're all working. We build this knowledge base up inside of the team and the skill set.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And if this is easier to do when you're kind of building a company from scratch, and we've seen some of this where it's like, oh yeah, we can hire a product strategist. Oh well, they report to like product management, or no, they're just on the dev team. That's it. Like it's that simple, right? And there's no kind of structure or separate departments and stuff like that when you get to grow kind of organically. In bigger companies, it's hard because all of these structures already exist. But all we're really asking for is like, hey, can you come spend Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with us? Mm-hmm. Or if there's enough work, like, can you just be on our team? And I know you'll probably have a couple other duties back in your home department. That's fine, but like, I'm just going to ask you 18 questions a day, so you might as well come sit with us because there's enough work for you to do in product that, and this is why I say this is not a day one conversation. We need to get teams launched and get companies to understand the effects of Scrum in the organization first. There's a lot of things that happen, but a day two conversation might be, hey, development team doesn't look like what you think it looks like. It is not full of software engineers and testers. Yep. It is full of all sorts of people, and there's so much power and throughput. You talk about wanting to go faster. Man, let's get all of these skills that we actually need on the team.
Yeah, I would say tracking somehow the dependencies you have on your team day one is a day one conversation.
There we go.
Because once oh yeah, we need legal and compliance because we hit them up 20 times a day. Like, and we're constantly emailing back and forth. There's all this like back and forth in this string of emails. If we could just have them and answer the questions right now, like, we can move so much faster. If you know that, then you can get that on day two, right? So I think that's a big one, because you really want that cross-functional team. You don't really know what you're going to need until you get there a lot of times, until you start working through it and be like, oh, we really do need that skill set. I always tell teams, tell me what you think about this, Eric. So Bob Galen's got this analogy where he talks about the product owner role being like a kind of a combination of traditional roles that are out there of business analyst, project manager, product management, and then like organizational leader, like executive, whatever, director, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a very small company, let's just say, or a small product, you have 5 developers on your team, that's as big as it is. You're going to probably do all 4 of those roles as the product owner. You're going to probably throw some UX in there, product marketing, like you're going to add other roles. It's going to be much broader. As you have more of these copy-paste teams that deliver a done working product, you are now the product owner, one single threaded leader. You're not doing the business analyst anymore. You're not doing the project management anymore. And you should be pushing away the product management even to some degree to the team, like you were talking about. I just can't do all the product marketing here.
Yep.
I might need to make some bigger decisions, but I need to push some of that away and focus more on being that organizational leader. Because if we're not aligned there on our vision and where we're going and how we're doing stuff, man, like that's going to slow everything down. And we're going to get the Homer Simpson's everybody car, right? Where it's like, it's very expensive and it doesn't solve any problems for anybody, you know?
And we already know this for every other role in an organization, right? If you're the first software engineer hire, you are a software engineer, a QA tester, a front-end UX designer, and the local DevOps expert.
Yeah.
Right. You're all of those things. And wouldn't it be cool if we could find people that have all of those skills at an expert level and hire all of those people? Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, each one's going to cost you $500,000, but that'd be a cool way to build a company. I would like to do that someday. But that's not the reality that most companies are in. So as soon as we start bringing more people onto the team, we're bringing different skill sets that help us get done. Right, we're hiring somebody whose expertise is actually in testing or actually in DevOps or whatever the skills are that we need. Why don't we do the same thing with product owners?
Mm-hmm.
Right, we say, hey, product owner, we have this small product, this small team. You have to do it all right now, and you can because it's small. But now that we're talking about, the banking app for a large international bank, why would we think that there's one product owner that's still doing all of those things? And I think the correct trade-off to make here is we still want one product owner because of all of the problems that solves with communication and overhead and decision-making in organizations and decision-making latency. We still want one product owner, but they just can't be doing all of those roles the same way that we can't keep hiring senior level full stack software developers. Right? There's just that's not a realistic strategy. So we need to start hiring product adjacent folks to work with the product owner on the team.
Yep. And what a better way to do that and build those skills up on those people that they now have this product leader that's kind of done maybe a little bit of everything. And now I come in and I maybe know product marketing really well, but now I can learn a whole nother area, really well and be better positioned to take on a whole new product area inside of the organization because I've got to be mentored by this person who can do it all. Like that's how you build up this product expertise inside of your organization.
Yes. All right. When are we starting this company? Let's go.
Right now. Let's get it.
Yeah. Hunting. That's always the hard part. Awesome. So what do we talk about here? Day one ideas. We have work with your product owner from day one so they don't get stuck in the backlog manager trap. And I think we expounded on that quite a bit at the end here with maybe future product owner ideas or day 2 or day 3 product owner ideas. But I think this is the most overlooked one. I especially every time I meet with an Agile coaching organization, like internal Agile coaches at a big company, it's the first thing I talk about with them because they're almost always ignoring product. They're almost always focused on events and working directly with Scrum masters and teams, but ignoring the product owner. So work with your product owner from day one. What else did we talk about? Definition of done from day one.
Definition of done and value delivery. Like that employer relationship where I'm paying your salary, but you're not delivering is not a good deal for your employer. Like deliver frequently. Like that's day one.
Yes. Get on the train where you can prove that you can get something done in an early sprint. And sprint 1, yes. But I'll give you a pass if you can't. Nothing's ruined if you can't. This is really hard stuff. But sprint 2 for sure then. Right. And you know what? I'll even give you a pass on sprint 2. And all of the trainers that are listening to this can just shut their ears off right now. But this is really hard stuff. And I'm not going to yell at you if you can't get done in the first 4 weeks of the first time you've ever done this. But then for sure sprint 3. Right. And the pattern that you should hear here is the only thing that as a coach or a Scrum master or a product owner that you should be focused on in early sprints is delivering one thing all the way to your definition of done. That's the focus. And if you drive out all of the impediments that are in your way, make sure your definition of done is small enough that it's reasonable. Right. Your definition of done doesn't say deployed to production and in use with 17 billion users. Like be reasonable in early sprints, but show the business, build that trust with stakeholders that when you say something's done, it is done according to the definition of done.
And don't show work in progress. Once you start down that path, it's a slippery slope, and all you start talking about then is productivity. What new tasks did you do? It leads you down to this micromanagement path.
That's right. Well, we talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did. Thanks for coming on again, Erik. Is there anything you want to plug at this time? Is there anything you want to talk to our users about? Anything they should know about?
No, I really don't have anything to plug. I am, we've worked together in the past. We've been at some startups together and things like that. I'm back on the consulting trail, so if your organization needs some help with getting teams started or some training or some coaching, I'm available.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.